What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Lost Tangent Outpost. My name is Spada, and welcome back to another episode of the MultiVersus Living Roster. Let's get this out of the way because I know there's a bunch of anticipation for me to talk about Dexter making it into MultiVersus, but I have to do my due diligence and explain what the Living Roster is really quickly. The Living Roster is an ever-expanding, ever-evolving prediction for the roster of playable characters coming to MultiVersus. I will give you some options for characters from a particular family of properties, and you will vote on who you think is most likely based on what you know and the information that I provide. We'll use any information, both official and unofficial, to help make it through the selection process. Make sure to like the video and help get this out to more people, and subscribe to be a part of the community. The larger the community, the more input, the more fun. Oh, and don't be afraid to get involved down in the comments. I always try and respond if I can or if I have something to say, but I read every comment regardless. All right, so the nature of the show means I really don't have a choice but to discuss the results of the last episode before I can get us to today's topic, but bear with me. We'll get through this in just a minute or two, and then we'll be on to discussing the main event. However, if you'd like to skip ahead to the discussion on Dexter and the other cartoon characters, here's the timestamp for you to do so. With that, let's discuss the results of the last episode. So last episode, I asked you all who you thought made the most sense from the 2000s era of Cartoon Network shows. I gotta say, I really was expecting it to be a closer vote between Samurai Jack and Ben 10. Either way, Ben 10 wins in a landslide. So let's go ahead and give Ben his place in the roster. Now, I can't walk away from this without talking about something specific. A few of you mentioned to me that you thought both Samurai Jack and Ben 10 were likely to make it into the launch roster of MultiVersus, but here's the thing. I totally agree with you. I think that both of them are highly likely. They both have massive fan bases and have been very big franchises for Cartoon Network over the years, but given the nature of this show, I really have no choice but to have y'all vote and then pick the one that wins. That doesn't mean that Jack isn't still viable or likely, or that he won't end up in the living roster at one point or another. It just means that for now, Ben 10 wins, and we see him as the most likely candidate. All right, and with that, we can move forward into discussing the focus of today's video. I'm certain a lot of you clicked on this video because you saw Dexter and were like, holy shit, was he confirmed? Or something to that effect. So let me go ahead and let you know now that he has not been confirmed or even clued into with any leaks or tweets or anything like that. He's not even the main focus of today's episode. However, he is part of the cartoon family of franchises, and he's who I thought would draw the most attention from that group of characters. Though they're all very popular shows, so I probably could have picked anyone for the thumbnail. Anyways, yes, that's today's topic. We're going to be talking about cartoon characters. Finally, this is one of the topics that I've been looking forward to the most. Cartoon started in the late 90s when I was still a kid, so I have a very soft place in my heart for them. This is an era of cartoons that was amazing to me. I loved every single thing they showed, but the ones that stood out to me were the Powerpuff Girls, Cow and Chicken, and Dexter's Laboratory. Later on, they did Ed, Edd n Eddy and Courage the Cowardly Dog, and like I said, I enjoyed all of these shows. I'm even getting to the point now where I'm starting to show them to my son for nostalgia's sake, and he's getting a kick out of them too. But those are our 5 options today, and I want to discuss each one of them individually before I give you the poll. First up, let's talk about the Powerpuff Girls. Man, this show was super dope to me when I was a kid. It's not like it was the first superhero cartoon, not even by a long shot, but it was the first one to do it in such a stylistic way. The art style was just so cool to me. Simple shapes, hard thick lines around the characters, super fluid and bold animation, and then the jovial nature of the show with the sisters and their personalities always being so different. Now, I always personally identified with Buttercup, both because she's the green one, and I tend to float toward more grumpy characters in general, but I think any and or all of the 3 sisters would make fantastic options for a game like MultiVersus. Their powers are a little undefined, which makes them super easy to adapt. Almost every episode culminated in a big battle, so there's a lot of reference material for them to pull from, but how would they do it exactly? Like, what would their moveset be? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe something like Injustice 2 did with the Ninja Turtles, where you pick a different skin and it slightly alters the move of that character that you're playing, or maybe having all 3 on screen at once, but for the Powerpuff Girls specifically, that seems like it would be a nightmare to implement. Next, let's talk about Cow and Chicken. Now, I always loved this show and I always thought it was super funny, but trying to think of how they would be adapted into MultiVersus as a character is kind of hard. Like, I can imagine them working maybe more like Ren and Stimpy do in Nick Brawl, but otherwise it's difficult to imagine for me. In either case, the game is already incorporating some slapstick-style characters like Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny, and their moves very clearly illustrate them using that slapstick style in their movesets, so I think it could totally work. And then we have to discuss Courage the Cowardly Dog next. This is the one that I'm least familiar with, but I still saw it plenty and remember it really fondly. It was one of the very few shows that was genuinely terrifying to me as a kid. The imagery was always super demented. The situation for Courage was always awkward due to him living with a man that yelled at him half the time. But as a character for a game like like MultiVersus, I imagine he'd utilize a lot of body morphing because that was kind of the animation style. Whenever he'd be frightened or excited, his face and his body would morph. Maybe he'd be able to call out or summon characters that appeared as villains or antagonists on the show for like special attacks. I think what's fun about a character like him is that he's got access to a plethora of scenarios that could be adapted into a Jill from Marvel vs. Capcom 2 type moveset, or maybe even someone like Frank West from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Then there's my favorite cartoon, Ed, Edd n Eddy. Man, I love this show. I'm not sure what it was that drew me to it, but it was always super funny to me. I loved their color palette for the show that made absolutely no sense, and the style of drawing that was always kind of ugly, and I loved Ed, that's single D Ed. But for them to be implemented into MultiVersus might be tough. I've heard that the guy that created the show was very hardline about sharing the rights to his characters, which he apparently still owns the rights to, but he's definitely shown a willingness to share them with other shows on the Cartoon Network lineup over the years, so it's not impossible, though I guess it is a bit more difficult than the others. But how would they play? I mean, to me, it makes the most sense to have them move around as a group on screen together at all times. Maybe a little bit like Ice Climbers, but less reliant on each other. I can't imagine where they would separate, but you might have one of them pop out to do like an attack or a special. Maybe they could throw out a really big jawbreaker for a projectile. I don't know. Maybe one of you has a better idea, but I'd love to see them implemented however they decide to do it. And then lastly, let's discuss the headliner of today's video, Dexter. This one seems to be the most interesting to me, not because the others wouldn't be super fun, but Dexter, being an inventor, gives him access to a massive library of abilities and moves. He could have a teleport, which is something that we've not seen in the game yet. He could have a ray gun that causes different status effects, positive for his partner, negative for his opponents. And the show's undercurrent of a rivalry with Mandark and his sometimes adversarial relationship with his sister makes for some really interesting elements. I can imagine his moveset utilizing these aspects as well, like a special where DD sets off an explosive by pressing the red button, or a movement input that has Dexter running away from or toward Mandark. There's just so many options for the moveset that it's hard for me to really decide what it would be. Either way, as you can see, I have a lot to say about these characters, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop right there. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about their movesets and what you think they would look like in the comments, so don't forget to drop some ideas down below. With that, which cartoon property do you think is most likely to get represented in MultiVersus? Powerpuff Girls, Cow and Chicken, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Ed, Edd n Eddy, or Dexter's Laboratory. To vote, you can go to one of two places. The first is most easily accessed by subscribing to the channel and going to the channel's community page. There you'll have a poll associated with today's episode at the very top of the page. The other option is to go to the link I've posted in the description of today's video, as well as pinned to the top of the comment section. This link will take you to a custom poll made on a website called Straw Poll. I look forward to seeing the results of this episode because I genuinely have no clue who you guys are gonna pick. I think I'm gonna go with Dexter's Lab, but even then, I don't know for sure. I'd be excited to see any of these characters implemented in the game. All right, guys, that's the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Help me determine what class you think the character you pick should be and how they would play. Thanks for coming by, everyone. And until next time, later.